Hello and welcome to a very long overdue video on V70s. Despite being my most popular car by far, over the last 8 years, somehow a standard service video has slipped through the net. So today, at 327,000 miles, I'm going to carry out a full filter service on the 2.4 D5 engine. Now this particular one is a 2004, but this procedure will cover any 2.4 D5 engine fitted to a P2 platform car. So that's the S60, S80, V70, XC70 and XC90. Parts I'm using today are genuine Volvo parts from Riverside Volvo in Hull. Now I've decided to use genuine parts on this occasion because there isn't much price difference between these and aftermarket MAN or quality aftermarket parts which I would normally use. So we've got the oil filter, this is with a small trade discount, oil filter £11.40, fuel filter by far the most expensive, not sure why, £38.40. The cabin filter, more expensive than the air filter somehow, £24.82. The air filter, £23.20. The sump washer, sump plug washer, that is £1.62. And after some discussion with Tom at GSF in Goole, the oil that I have chosen is this Comma fully synthetic 5W40. Now there will be different recommendations for this engine depending on where you look. I can't with any proper experience tell you which oil is best for your car. I get asked all the time, I'm not sure. I prefer to use cheaper oil and service the engine more often. So I would use a cheaper oil and service the car every 5,000 miles. On this particular occasion, I've gone for this Comma fully synthetic 5W40, which was recommended on the Comma website for this particular car and engine. It was, however, very expensive in comparison to what I'd normally use. So this was £8.80 a litre, and because the capacity of the engine is 6.5 litres, I've had to get two 5 litre bottles of it. So I've spent 90 quid on oil. You wouldn't necessarily need to spend that much. So overall, we've got about £190 here. However, you could get away with a 5 litre and two single litre bottles, which would be cheaper at the time, but not cheaper per litre of oil, which is why I've gone for the 10 litres. If you were trying to do this on a budget, there are cheap aftermarket parts. I wouldn't personally recommend them, but they are there, and I believe you'd be able to do this service for less than £100 using budget parts and cheaper oil. We'll start with what's required underneath the car. So we've got the oil and the fuel filter, which are both underneath the car. So I'll start with the oil, which will require removal of an under tray, which is attached with 12mm bolts all the way around. I'd recommend jacking up using this portion of the front subframe and then fitting axle stands out of the way but on the front subframe. If you were to use the sills of the car, the weight of the engine or the overhang towards the front of the vehicle would be a bit too much, so it's preferable that the axle stands are fitted somewhere close to the front of the car. Remove the engine cover. Now ideal oil change conditions will be when the engine is warm. So if your engine isn't already up to operating temperature, let it idle for however long it takes to warm up, as the warm oil will leave the sump much easier. This is the oil filter location. I hope this time for a regular service light stays on, because it randomly switches off, so I've never been able to do a service light reset. It's just switched off now. So I brought the car up to temperature because it's been sat in the unit overnight, because I had to clean up an ABS sensor, so that's why the driver's side front wheel is off. You don't need the wheel off, but I thought it would let more light in underneath the car. The oil filter housing is a 36mm socket, so it's a lot bigger than any kits that you would normally get, and 36mm doesn't usually come in toolkits. Because mine isn't too tight, I get away with a very large adjustable spanner. I have in the past had to use a 36mm socket, but because I was the last person to service it, I know that nothing's been over tightened. We'll separate the old filter from the filter cap. Remove the old O-ring. Turns out this filter is actually manufactured by MAN, with the Volvo part number on it. So both ends of the filters are the same size. Fit the new O-ring. Make sure there is a light smearing of oil all over the new O-ring. I'm going to leave this out for now while we drop the oil. So remove the oil filler cap as well. So now ready to drain the oil. So underneath at the back of the sump we've got a 17mm sump plug. Now due to the direction of the sump plug, having the car lifted up at the front does help to drain the sump fully. However, with the oil capacity being 6.5 litres, the flow is quite quick and catching it can be an issue, especially with these basic oil catching cans. So you may wish to have a proper bowl or something held up to the sump once you remove the plug. So as you can see, the oil flow is pretty fast, and it's actually too fast for the catch can to cope with. So now it's gone over. So yeah, you really do need a bigger container. These standard catch cans can't cope with the flow. So now leave the oil to drain out as long as possible. What I sometimes like to do is stick a little bit of clean oil in the oil filler cap, and this just pushes a little bit of extra dirty oil out of the sump. Now I was going to get on with the fuel filter, but as I need the catch can in order to do it, it's located underneath the car in front of the driver's side rear wheel. What I've done is stick a little bit of clean oil in the filler cap, which should push a bit of extra dirty oil out of the sump. We can refit the new filter now. Now these have a torque figure on them of 25 Newton meters, but really you are just tightening them until the metal and plastic surface meet each other. Before refitting the sump plug, we want to switch over to the new washer. Once you are happy with the amount of oil that is drained out, refit the sump plug with the new washer and tighten to 35 Newton meters. Sump plug tightened, under tray back on if you have got one, and drop the car down to the ground. We're now ready to top up the oil. As already stated, we've got a 6.5 litre capacity on this engine. So with two 5 litre bottles I can safely pour in the entire first bottle. What I'm going to do is add just above 6 litres, refit the filler cap and run the car briefly. With the car off and warm, about 5 minutes later I'll check the level on the dipstick. So that's just over 6 litres added. We'll refit the filler cap and run the car back up to temperature. Engine off for the last 10 minutes. Dipstick out, clean it. Dipstick out and read it. So I've got very clean oil now, but as you can see we are in this area here. So we can top it up, but anywhere to the upper end of the hatched area here is absolutely fine. So I'll top it up so that it's closer to the mark. Well, that's the oil and filter done. You don't necessarily need to jack the car up to get to the fuel filter, but of course it allows you a lot easier view of what you're doing. The fuel filter assembly is located about 2 feet in front of the rear wheel. Now, being the fuel filter, this is one of those items that quite often gets neglected on services, which means that quite often these will be very, very tight to remove. Now you've got a drain here, which is a water drain. You can drain out this canister, which will make the filter change less messy, or at least less possibility of the fuel splashing everywhere. Now I'm just going to drop a little bit. I'm not going to drop all of it out. There's no need to waste all of the diesel. And now what we'll need to do is turn the whole thing, assuming it's not seized up. So I'll need both hands for this. Oh, that's not too bad. And quite often when people refit these, the plastic threads and they get cross-threaded, so be aware of that, especially if it's completely solid and you can't remove it. but you can usually tell by the gap where the housing meets the assembly. So as you can see, this canister is full of diesel. If you sit that down without spilling it, then you don't need to waste the diesel that's inside there, and you're left with the fuel filter pushed in at the top here. That's the old man filter. I'd definitely recommend wearing gloves for this. The only reason I haven't put mine on is because I'm between moving units and the gloves are in the other unit. So as well as the new filter in the box, you'll get another O-ring. Now the O-ring is up here. Hoping you can see that. Now, same as on the oil filter housing, make sure that there's a smearing of preferably oil or grease on the new O-ring, and this should allow it not to seize when it comes to removing it next time. So a new filter, this one's fully wrapped. So a small O-ring on here, push it up into the housing, and be aware that this canister is full of diesel. If there is any debris in here, obviously you'll have to pour out the diesel and remove it. The diesel in here will, if there's too much in there, when you replace it, it will overflow with the new filter in position. But as I drained out a little bit of it, we don't get any overflow, and you'll want to be very careful that the threads go in the correct place and you don't end up cross-threading it, because it is easily done. So I'm struggling with the new O-ring. This is the old one and it's quite flat. It's really tight over the new O-ring to get the housing over. So I am actually going to try refitting the old O-ring, providing I can get it straight as it was. I don't like having to do this, but I'm struggling so much to get the housing over the new O-ring. I just don't think it's worth it. It feels like it's cross-threading. So what I'll do now is start the car and check that there's definitely no leaks. So you might want to clean off this area with brake cleaner, just so that you can see whether it's leaking afterwards. You'll only need to cycle the ignition a few times just to prime the new filter. So long as nothing's leaking, then we're all done. So now we'll come on to the air filter, which is nice and easy on this particular model. This is the only part where there is some variation between models, as far as I know. So this engine is a Euro 3, 2004. When they switched to Euro 4, as far as I'm aware, they placed the ECU on top of the airbox, so the airbox is slightly different. So on a later model, you would need to pull off this plastic cover, and this reveals the ECU underneath, and then you'll have Torx screws around the airbox lid. Whereas on the early model, we've just got these easy clips. May help to disconnect the MAF sensor. And then the airbox lid can slide out from the rear of the airbox and easily be removed. Now this looks filthier than it is because it is actually a K&N filter, but I am going to replace it with the genuine Volvo part. Make sure that your airbox is clean. If there is any debris in there, vacuum it out. When refitting the air filter, make sure that the edges definitely go down, because if they aren't fully down, it gets very difficult to close the airbox. And you'll see these plastic locating into the lower part of the airbox. You'll find a lot of cars, the middle one hasn't gone in, or it's just bent the airbox out of shape. I've not really seen one where it's fitted properly. So that's the air filter replaced on the old style airbox. For the later style, we've got T25 Torx screws going all the way around. Now, I can't recall whether you do need to disconnect the ECU or not, but I imagine that you'll just be able to flip it up, and as you can see, the air filter is much smaller on the later model. This one got filthy because the DPF was blocked, so we took one of the sensors out and there was soot in the engine bay. As you can see, the earlier filter is much larger than the later filter. Well, same as the earlier filter, just make sure that the edges are definitely down before refitting. Final job, the cabin filter. So we're in the passenger side footwell, and I do have a few trim panels missing here, but you would normally remove 2 T25 Torx screws from those two positions there. And then back here, we've got the cabin filter box with another 2 screws on the front. So there should be 4 screws in here. Looks like we've got another one. Another one at the back there. There should be another one here. So I know which way the filter went round. So we can see the airflow is going that way because we've got all the debris on this side. see why this back screw was missing, because there's no room to get a tool in there. So there's one missing from the back on mine. So that's the cabin filter replaced and the complete filter service done. Thanks for watching. I do hope this video has helped you with your car. If this is the first video you've found of mine, then please do check out my channel for hundreds of videos on this car and hundreds more on many others. All comments and subscriptions are very much appreciated. If you have any questions or recommendations, just stick them in the comments section. Thanks again.